Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of Strategic Vision Institute, I welcome you all to the SPIR two-day webinar on Indian strategic behavior and stability in South Asia. This webinar has been divided into two sub-themes. The theme of today's discussion is Emerging Global Trends and Indian Strategic Thinking. Before we proceed further, I would like to mention that this webinar will be conducted in the form of panel discussion during which each speaker will be given 15 minutes. If anyone is having trouble hearing or viewing the webinar or is having any form of connectivity issues, please do mention this in the chat and we shall try our best to address the issue from our end. Kindly note that by default, mics of all the attendees will be on mute and only panelists will be allowed to use the mic and video. If anyone from the audience would like to ask a question, they are requested to kindly use the Q&A option to type out their question. Please do include your name as well as your organizational affiliation along with your question. The question will be then presented to our panel by the moderator during the question and answer session accordingly. While we fully encourage you to participate, we request you to please be brief in your questions. We shall try our best to ensure that all the questions get answered within our allotted time. Please further note that all the opinion voiced at the SPIR platform are independent opinion of the speakers and audiences and not the official policy of the SPIR. This is an open house activity which will be reported in media. This session is being live streamed on our Facebook page and official website. The full recording of the webinar will be available on official website and YouTube channel of the SPIR. If anyone would like to tag or post screen grabs of this event on their personal blogs, web pages, or social media, please do mention that webinar was organized by the SPI. Today, SPI has organized this two-day webinar to look into the evolving strategic situation in South Asia due to Indian actions and suggest a combination of pragmatic foreign policy options for Pakistan. For this purpose, we have a very distinguished panel for today's discussion. Now, let me introduce to our speakers. Our first guest speakers for today's webinar is Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. Dr. Jaspal is a professor at the School of Politics and International Relations, Qazi University, Islamabad, where he teaches various aspects of international political and defense affairs, nuclear and missile proliferation, national security, Pakistan, and foreign policy and strategic affairs. Professor Jaspal, as a guest speaker and visiting lecturer, still continues to deliver lectures at many professional and training institutions. Professor Jaspal holds PhD and MPhil in International Relations and MA in Political Science. Professor Jaspal's research interests include Pakistan, national security, proliferation of nuclear weapons and missile systems, particularly in South Asia and Middle East, arms control and disarmament, nuclear non-proliferation regime, trends in global and domestic politics of Pakistan, terrorism, etc. Professor Jaspal is a widely published scholar. He has authored book India's Surgical Strike Stratagem, Brinkmanship and Response into April 2019. He has also authored Nuclear Risk Reduction Measures and Restraint Regime in South Asia in 2004. Today, he will be sharing his thoughts on Indo-US strategic partnership, great power expectation, and India's performance. Our second guest speaker for today's webinar would be Dr. Atia Kazmi. Dr. Atia Kazmi is Senior Research and Policy Analyst at NUST Institute of Policy Studies, Islamabad. Her career spans over 2 decades and includes research, administrative, and academics experience. She has organized and participated in numerous national and international advocacy initiatives and Track 1.5 and Track 2 strategic dialogues, including those organized by International Institute of Strategic Studies and Peking University. Dr. Ali's research expertise include national security, geopolitics, strategic stability, knowledge economy. She has authored books, chapters, numerous policy reports, research papers, and opinion articles in reputed national and international forums that include Shanghai University and China Foreign Affairs University. Her recent book, The Road to Balance in South Asia Pacific, Geopolitics of American Rebalancing and Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, is the first in this subject by Pakistani. Dr. Ali also teaches at NUST School of Social Science and Humanities and National Defense University Department of Strategic Studies. Today, she will be speaking on China-India political and economic relationship, cooperation, or strategic competition. Our third guest speaker for today's webinar would be Ambassador retired Qazi Khalilullah. Ambassador Qazi Khalilullah is Executive Director of Center for International Strategic Studies from February till today. He holds a master's degree in International Public Policy from School of Advanced International Studies, Johns Hopkins University, USA. He joined Foreign Service of Pakistan in 1985 and served at Foreign Office Headquarters in Islamabad as Section Officer, Director, Director General, and Additional Secretary. He held various diplomatic assignments in Pakistan, missions abroad, Embassy of Pakistan, Moscow, Embassy of Pakistan, Ashgabat, Embassy of Pakistan, Kiev, and Permanent Mission of Pakistan to the United Nations in Geneva. He also attended United Nations conferences and expert group meetings, World Summit on the International Information Society held in Geneva in 2003, member of the UN Working Group on Internet Governance in 2005, and member of UN Group of Governmental Experts on Illicit Small Arms and Light Weapons Brokering in 2007. He was a spokesperson of Ministry of Foreign Affairs from May 2015 till February 2016, and served as ambassador of Myanmar from 2008 to 2012, ambassador of Cuba from 2012 till 2014, and ambassador of Russian Federation from 2016 till 2019. Today, he will be speaking on Indian Balancing Act with Russia, USA, and China. Thank you. And I would like to invite Brigadier Dr. Naeem Salik, Executive Director, SPIR, to give his welcome and introductory remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shebanu, and I would like to welcome all the worthy participants and the audience for this two-day webinar, which is being conducted by the SPI. As I welcome you all for this webinar, my heart goes out to the millions of poor Pakistani people who are stranded and are in difficult situation because of this flood catastrophe. And let's not forget them while we are busy in our own other activities. And let's pray and do whatever we can for them to ease their sufferings. We have an excellent panel of speakers, and in my introductory remarks, I will try to avoid getting into the specifics of the subject because I don't want to preempt these panelists. I would just give a general background of the strategic environment in South Asia. As we all know, after the British departure from the subcontinent, the Indians viewed themselves as their legitimate successor of the British Empire in South Asia and wanted to continue to play the great game which the British had been playing. However, they found Pakistan in their way, and instead of being able to project their power outside the boundaries of South Asia, they were entangled by Pakistan and with the inward borders which were created and irritating for the Indians and continues to irritate them, because if they have want to play any practical role in Afghanistan or in Central Asia, they have to go through Pakistan, and that really bothers them. And that's why they have been trying to undermine Pakistan, and in fact, their effort has been to play the role of a regional hegemon right from the beginning. Given their geographical size and the population and their central location in South Asia, they share borders with all South Asian countries, which are much smaller compared to India. And the only country which has resisted Indian hegemony has been Pakistan. And that is why they have developed that kind of hostility towards Pakistan. India has adopted its own version of the Monroe Doctrine, which we also know as the Indira Doctrine, in which they made it very clear that the regional country should not try to involve outside powers in the regional affairs, and whether they are internal or regional security issues, they should defer to the preferences of India. And they have been trying to intervene in their neighbors' issues. We remember what happened in the 1971, and then later on, the Sri Lankan insurgency, the role played by India. Then in the 1990s, we had that Gujarat Doctrine, which was also called the India's new neighborhood policy. And interestingly, in that doctrine also, although it apparently appeared to be a relatively docile doctrine, but in essence, it had the same ingredients as the earlier Indian doctrine. And while India was aiming to develop bilateral relations with the neighboring smaller countries and giving them some concessions, Pakistan was totally ignored and not even mentioned in that doctrine. And they, in fact, through this doctrine, they wanted to isolate Pakistan in South Asia. And that thing has continued. India has also mastered the art of exploiting the great powers' rivalry to its advantage. We witnessed this during the Cold War, when they benefited from both the Soviet Union and the United States, while propagating their non-alignment. At stages in history, particularly 1971, after that August 1971 agreement of friendship and cooperation with the Soviet Union, they were virtually the defense partners of the Soviet Union, but yet they remained non-aligned and continue to claim that status. Now they have picked up the pieces again, and after the Cold War, they are now trying to benefit from the emerging China and US rivalry, and trying to project themselves as the power which can help in the containment of China in this region, and thereby benefiting from the US in terms of access to cutting edge technologies and the exceptional waiver they got in the NSG, and in support in the form of the foundational agreements which they recently signed with the United States. At the same time, despite the hostility between the United States and Russia, they have continued to import weapons and equipment from Russia. In fact, almost 50% of their weapons and equipment have been coming from Russia in the past few years. And despite the Ukraine war, they continue to import oil and gas and other the grain and other commodities from Russia. And the Americans just prefer to look the other way. Similarly, once they entered into the S-400 deal with Russia, the Americans did not enforce the sanctions under the CISSS law, which they imposed upon Turkey, one of their NATO allies. So this is the generally the situation since the arrival of the Modi government in New Delhi in 2014. India has adopted a very aggressive policy towards Pakistan, and its strategic behavior in South Asia has been aggressive and very assertive. And it has been trying to put pressure on Pakistan. It has refused to come to terms with, come to the table and negotiate the settlement of disputes with Pakistan. And it is now considering itself to be in a different league altogether, as it is part of various agreements like Brig, SPIR, and others. And its growing strategic affinity with US has made it very arrogant as far as its dealing with Pakistan are concerned. Interestingly, India has very cleverly played its foreign policy, and despite the standoff in the Ladakh area, their trade with China has been flourishing, and it has in fact exceeded $100 billion. So they have adopted a policy of benefiting from all the great powers while trying to impose themselves on the smaller neighboring states, including Pakistan. So with this background, I think we are going to have a very interesting session today, and we'll continue with this tomorrow as well. And I would not stand further in the way of our wonderful panelists, and let's hear them, and would also like to see the audience participating actively and asking questions, entering into discussion. panelists. I now hand over the webinar back to our moderator, Ms. Sherwa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to request our first. I would like to invite now. Yes, sir. Over to you, sir. Dr. Jaspal, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me on this very important webinar. Let me start first congratulating the new Executive Director of SPIR Strategic Vision Institute, Dr. Salik, and I wish and pray that under his leadership, the strategic vision will continue whatever it was doing and further grow. Having said this, let me start by raising a few issues. If we focus on it, and Indo-US strategic partnership, great power expectation. I think that here by the great power, we refer to the Washington expectation from the Indo-US strategic partnership. If we see that Indo-US strategic partnership is almost over 3 decades. When we start looking this, of course, India's relations with the United States since 1962 or tracing from 1959, they were very cordial. However, their strategic cooperation was very much covert. And on many issues, they were supporting one another or each other implicitly rather than explicitly. And we have seen how India was using non-aligned movement, SPIR, at the same time having a treaty of friendship with the former Soviet Union, Russia. But anyway, to cut the long story short, in 1992, when India and the United States signed the naval exercise agreement, Malabar naval exercise, we can trace their visibility in the strategic partnership from that agreement, and the naval exercise took place in 1994. Since that day to date, they invited other parties as well, and then later on Japan also became a part of it. But then we trace that on the strategic chessboard, besides this naval exercise, they use the word strategic partnership and rather than strategic alliance. Interestingly, when I see the recent developments, it becomes very difficult for me to make a distinction, at least that how we can maintain that whether India is the strategic partner or is an ally in the US balancing and rebalancing strategy in Asia. But nevertheless, the word they are using strategic partner, so we stick with the strategic partner in this context. So I noticed that in 2004 and 2005, they were decisive years in their strategic partnership, which set the scene that the strategic partnership is having a multifaceted kind of thing. For example, in 2004, there was an Indo-US agreement on the space cooperation, and then in 2005, their famous Indo-US nuclear deal or civilian nuclear cooperation. And at that time, it was very important to note that when this deal was signing, at that time, the Indian, later on, this Shamsara, who became a foreign secretary as well, he noticed that when they said that this Indo-US civilian nuclear cooperation deal will be going to boost economic cooperation, President Bush said more than that. That was mean political and military side as well. Then we find that there was cooperation continued. A major in this strategic partnership was during the Obama's when they declared India as a major defense partner. And that's why, if you see in the recent 1 decade, there is $1 billion, you can say, equipment deal. We find that in 2017, the reference here, Trump administration's national security strategy released in December 2017, which categorically stated India has a role to play in the Indian Ocean, South Asia, and beyond. It's very important that India has been endorsed in 2009 by Robert Gates, the Defense Secretary of the US, as a net security provider in the region in an indirect manner. But then in Manmohan Singh policy, a net security provider for the Indian Ocean region. And gradually, now we started seeing India started claiming or presenting itself as a, you can say, Indian Ocean is India's ocean. So if you see that from 2017, what in the strategic literature we find that there is a bipartisan consensus in the United States. The bipartisan consensus is that the US has to work with the partner states to preserve its preeminence regionally and globally against China. So this consensus we see in the kind of a thing, despite a number of the differences between the Trump and the Biden administration, you can say domestic and foreign policies, we find that this is a continuity. So if you see what is a continuity from Trump administration, and you find a similar thing in try to see in the Biden administration, this is one of the most important continuity, that a bipartisan consensus that they have to they identified China as a strategic challenger. So in this context, though many scholars are now seeing in the last 6 months after the Ukraine war, is Americans from China shifted their focus from China to the Europe and on the Russia. But the general consensus is still continuing. No, China seems a bigger challenge and Russia as a part. And if you see in their military doctrines, 2008 nuclear posture review, 2019 Indo-US Indo-US-American strategy, and then continuing 2022 Defense DoD report, you would find that this consensus or this kind of understanding is there. So that resulted in the India's advantage. And that cemented the strategic partnership. And we find that there has been starting of the 2+2, you can say, dialogue process. And in this 2+2 dialogue process, many things they try to overcome or develop a convergence. And then we have also seen a number of the other side of things. Quickly, in this context, we find the outcome of this was, you can say, LIMO. There was also outcome of COMCASA, outcome of BICA in 2022, and then number of the other things. Now, if we see on all these things and the way from bilateral, India has been engaged into a multilateral. By bilateral of these agreements, now you are moving what we see there when this Quad was rebooted in 2017, and especially it received a strong ownership from the President Biden. And in the recent 3 summits, if you start from 2021 and then the recent one too, you find that India has been involved in this multilateral Quad. And this multilateral Quad is also in the Chinese literature, they started referring it as a Asian NATO. So if you focus on all these things, you find that the strategic partnership of India and the US is, you can say, is strengthening in this domain. And then the question is what has been raised, great powers or the Americans, what you call as expectation from India. This is a debate. Why? Because the way I just presented the sequence, in that way, it seems that the Indo-US strategic partnership in the last 2 decades at least has been institutionalized. Yes, it has been institutionalized. If you are looking South Asia, if you are focusing Indian Ocean, if you are focusing China. But why I'm saying quickly, if you see the way India has been giving the preferences in the last 5-6 years over Pakistan, the way India is now treated in the Indian Ocean, and India also, here is the Prime Minister Modi's Sagar policy, swapping India's look east with the act east policy, and announcing India's own Indo-Pacific strategy. That gives you the enough, you can say, argument or enough material to justify the strengthening of the Indo-US strategic partnership. But now, can we still say that it is on a positive trajectory? Or there is a need for the Americans to worry? There are also variables which drive our attention towards it. Let me start with this. What is, if you see in the last 4-5 months, the Indian External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, he has been continuously, you can say, highlighting that India is not part of any bloc. He very systematically is saying India is not joining the, what you call it, Chinese axis, nor the, you can say, going against it. But at the same time, it says that India is not attempting to join the US axis and Chinese axis, recently used. But he deliberately underplaying the third axis in the triangle. If you see China, Russia, and the US, 3 great powers triangle, on these 2 axes, he is actually sitting on the Indo-US, on the Russian, on the China-US axis, and it has joined. But he's trying to distance. But it is also trying to balance in between the Russia and the US axis. In that context, there is the first point that India is trying to preserve its strategic, you can say, autonomy, at least rhetorical. And when it is trying to preserve its strategic autonomy, naturally it generates this question whether is India performing according to the Americans' perceptions or not. Then we have seen India is actively participating in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India is actively participating in BRICS. India has lowered the tension or tried to lower the tension. Despite this, that India had demonstrated its China's posture in Gulwan 2020. But after that, India has adopted a deterring posture, but not instigating the China. Then we find there was, under the American leadership or guidance, they were raising 4 integrated command systems. But after the death of Bipin, we find that this integrated command system has also, you can say, lost its attraction. So quickly, where I find that there are, let's say, starting with 4 areas. I flashed them because my time is only 3 minutes left. First is what they were expecting. If you see, when you go to the US or review the American literature, they say India is a natural partner. And when they're talking about natural partner, they are referring values, democratic values, democratic political culture. Ironically, this debate has to start sooner or later. Though Biden say values are back after the Trump, but values are not back. They say democratic versus communist authoritarian China. But practically what is happening? Just see, on 15th August 2022, when the Prime Minister Modi made his independence speech, generally, in the last 75 years, this speech was made keeping in mind Gandhian, Nehruvian, you can say, outlook, not focusing. But this time in this speech, when he started it, he shifted and more emphasis on those peoples, and he started praising who even at that time during the freedom movement and later on opposed Gandhi and Nehru. He was more focusing on the people who use the violence. So he is now projecting a new, in India, there is a new narrative is emerging, Hindutva narrative, a violent narrative. Where is the democracy in which minorities have a say? So I think this is a first point on which the American public, American community, or the people who talk about democratic values versus authoritarian, this is area where India is losing and quickly going to lose its role to play. The second, economics. America has been projecting India as a big market. India's economy has slowed down. With this emerging nationalistic stream, you can say, drive in India, there is more protectionism as well. And their economy growth has slowed down. The middle class growth has slowed down. So what the Americans are expecting, a 1 billion plus market in the near future, they have to revisit that. That area is again not attractive for them. Third is military chessboard. They're giving them all these kinds of the agreements or things to the India. But India did not, you can say, change its policy on S-400 purchases. There was, interestingly, in 2017, US Congress passed a law that any state which purchase any military hardware from Russia, automatically it comes under the American sanction. Under this law, in this law, there was no waiver or nothing. The Turkey faced that law, but on the India, they went soft and they did not execute this law. India purchased S-400 missiles. Then in the case of Ukraine, India refused to, you can say, support the American. They did not change their policy. And that was, where are the values? So in that context, and militarily, if they go, I do understand there are many other areas which other speakers will be going to focus. Third is, as I said, in the geopolitics, if it is maintaining a tightrope, if you see China and Russia are becoming closer, how India is going to perform? For how long India will work as independent? One point where we have to take into account, India announced, or India was very active part of international North-South transport corridor. It was shelved to some extent, starting from Mumbai, Chabahar, Zadan, Kandahar, up to the Central Asia. But at the Caspian Sea Summit, President Putin, again, you can say, talked about the North-South transport, international North-South transport corridor. And now Indians are working. So in this context, we see India is maintaining its very cordial economic, military, diplomatic or political relations with Russia. And here Americans are agreed to it. They are living because Americans, my own understanding is, before ending my presentation, if you review the Americans' history, their internationalist policy started from 1945, post-1945. They all had their alliances or their allies or partners. They were bandwagoning the US. Today, US has a partner which is good for them to balance or rebalance with China, but it is not ready to bandwagon on the US And that is India. So naturally, India's attitude and India's the way it is moving at domestically and externally, it will be frustrating, maybe not for the Biden administration for the next 2 years, but it will be definitely frustrating for the American thinkers, American political strategic analysts. So my understanding is, despite all these things, yes, there are variables, there's a room where India and the US are not comfortable. Maybe generally we are seeing these are the areas which we have to keep in mind when we are tapping or maintaining a relation with the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for providing your detailed analysis on the subject. Now, I would like to invite our second guest speaker, Dr. Atia Kazmi, to deliberate on China-India political and economic relationship, cooperation, or strategic competition. Over to you, ma'am.
Well, I'm Naeem. Assalamu alaikum, and good morning to everyone. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for inviting me to such a stimulating debate. Congratulations and best wishes to Dr. Salik sir and SPIR. My emphasis is on China-India political and economic relations, whether there's cooperation or strategic competition. So while investigating the fundamental dimensions of China-India politico-economic relations, it is easy to determine that there are both cooperation and competition. And I'll first cover the cooperation and then the competition, besides highlighting the Indian strategic and implications. We have observed that for years now, India has seemingly been at loggerheads with China, and the security-based bilateral relationship has been turbulent. Their legal boundary that's known as the McMahon Line is a highly disputed border and has brought the two armies face to face a number of times. So border issues, intermittent escalations, and diplomatic differences, these all have been a norm, and they have actually spilled over mistrust and uncertainty and made reachability non-achievable objective. Conversely, another angle reflects stability in their relations, and that's the political will to increase trade and investment with China, and the craving for Chinese investment in the Indian goods and services markets, as well as intelligentsia, academia, and socio-cultural sectors. In the past 2 decades, particularly the time frame that runs parallel to the onset of US-India strategic partnership back in 2005, Chinese presence in India has increased significantly, I would say, and while an increasing number of Indians are also doing business with Chinese. As of early 2019, more than 1,000 Chinese firms were operating in India, as stated in Routledge Handbook of China-India Relations. Today, direct investment, global mergers, acquisitions, and many more ways facilitated by Chinese companies are rampant in the manufacturing hubs of Indian Gujarat, Maharashtra, and other states like Tamil Nadu, like Rajasthan and Haryana. Moreover, Chinese companies, including Alibaba and Tencent, have invested millions of dollars into Indian digital startups and are key stakeholders in several Indian companies. And there are also assurances to develop industrial parks for Chinese investors in India. Another example is an annual investment seminar in Beijing organized jointly by the Startup India Association and the Indian Embassy in China, and it's been organized since 2017, in which Indian startups network with their Chinese counterparts and engage with Chinese investors. And like the seminar in 2018 was attended by almost 400 members, and it was attended by Chinese angel investors and venture capital funds as well. Likewise, Indian investors and their IT professionals and Indian academics are equally connected with and settled in major cities in China. Although the so-called problem of trade barriers and tough rules of procurement are often registered, this connection has never stalled. Tata Consultancy Services, for example, it's working in China since 2002 as provider of IT services and now has thousands of employees across Shanghai, Shenzhen, Hangzhou, Dalian, Tianjin, and other wholly owned Indian subsidiaries and joint ventures produce pharmaceuticals, refractories, auto parts, wind turbines, and other related equipment in China for local and foreign markets. The documented bilateral trade volume stood at around $125 billion in 2021. As India's exports to China only grew by 34.2% that year. And this year in 2022, bilateral trade has gone up to $67 billion during the first half of this year. And we'll notice that India's bilateral trade with China is more than it has with the United States or any other Western ally or even Russia. Even during the pandemic, two-way trade increased by 43% in 2021. Then there is also some kind of cooperation on several issues, including climate change, food security, data relocation, and sustainable development as well. While talking about the political fronts, India is member of joint forums with China, such as BRICS, as Sir Jaspal just mentioned, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well, and partners in New Development Bank and Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. Moreover, it has not blocked Chinese observer status in SAARC, although it has kept the organization virtually dysfunctional given its stubbornness against Pakistan. Then India does not openly oppose China on multilateral arms control forums. Rather, it prefers to abstain instead of voting against China. It happened, for example, on the Western moves against Chinese behavior with Uyghurs and on Taiwan. Similarly, India supported the issue of coal reduction and climate justice at COP26 conference. And then I've observed that the Indian strategic literature and its strategic communication is highly nuanced for China. I mean, it doesn't seek open confrontation many a times. And in fact, its intelligentsia has deeper ingress in China than us. And I've seen it myself on my visit to a very famous university there. Moreover, the Indian government has been shifting courses for domestic gains. For instance, around the Wuhan informal summit, PM Modi boycotted the 60th anniversary celebrations of Dalai Lama's sojourn. Also, he insisted in the Shangri-La dialogue that the Indo-Pacific was not directed against China. There's a focus on cultural cooperation as well, with the Bollywood trying to make inroads into the Chinese society. In terms of competition with China, it is important to understand the Indian strategic thought, its attitudes, its practices, and the preferences for maintaining relations with states in the region and beyond. Although the neighborhood first policy, as Sir Salik also mentioned, is professed as the core component of Indian foreign policy, and they say that it's focused on peaceful relations and collaborative, synergetic co-development with its South Asian neighbors, any conscious effort is entirely missing. there are constant attempts as a revisionist and expansionist state. Then India is part of anti-China alliances, the Quad grouping and the Indo-Pacific strategy. And it has been designated, we know that, as the net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. It has done joint exercises in Indian Ocean that was very close to Chinese EEZ, and in disputed border China's chagrin. To marginalize Delhi's regional primacy. And India has openly opposed CPEC and has sabotaged it through proxies by targeting Chinese interests, including its nationals in Pakistan. So we'll see that Indo-US strategic partnership is centered on China, but the plan to prop up India creates a direct security dilemma, not only for Pakistan, but for the entire region. And how did I study the Indian strategic behavior related to these trends? And how do these competitive cooperative trends explain Indian strategic behavior? In other words, I think India is simply making best of both worlds, and it's not likely to reverse years of hard work and progress by going to war with China, or even do Western bidding to contain China. We should remember that it has stood with the US in 20-year-long Afghanistan war based on rhetoric only, making libraries, hospitals, and working against Pakistan. But it did not shed blood or spend military resources. And we can see that the economic interests reign supreme, that New Delhi will never be sacrificed for any external player. To cut it short, India is intelligently making hay while the environment is amiable, and but in doing so, one of its vital objectives is to Finlandize Pakistan. It crafted the so-called 2.5 front security dilemma, but 80% of the military posture is trained onto Pakistan. It cannot be concluded with certainty that will it be able to play all sides for long, be able to maintain so-called strategic autonomy across the fence, either towards West or Russia, China, Entente cordiale. Therefore, if West continues to rely on India to contain China, it will face disappointment. It will only end up empowering India in terms of knowledge, in terms of economy, military power, and status. And it will be done at the cost of its Western interests and the future of this region and the world, I would say. And if there's, a Western plan B on India, that's for sure that it will not walk its talk on supporting Indians, UNSC members, and will not allow it to become an extra-regional power in any case. However, that is quite difficult because the Indian diaspora and lobby wields huge influences. So all these arrangements and engagements increase South Asian strategic instability, capitalizing collective dividends of geoeconomics look like a dream in the absence of rational, stable geopolitics. While playing China bogey, India shall try to maintain its strategic autonomy at all costs. Thus, there's a need to assess whether it will be rational to place all bets on it, because its poor strategic behavior accrues only for short-term gains in maximizing power and is neither grand nor long-term. These moves will end up harming the region, as the bluff may be called sooner. The UN, the United States, Russia, and China must gauge their engagements with India while remaining cognizant of its inconsistent and unsafe strategic behavior. For Pakistan, I would say these short-term challenges must provide a window to build and maximize internal power and remain steadfast with its strategic partners, while maintaining balanced relation with all states. And in the end, I'll just like to introduce some optimism, and that I think that if pragmatic realism could prevail, China, Pakistan, and India could become the powerhouse of the world and one of the leaders of Asian century. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. And I would like to invite our third guest speaker, Investor Qazi, to deliberate on Indian Balancing Act with Russia, USA, and China. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And like previous speakers, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Well, like previous speakers, let me, on behalf of all members of Team CISSS, as well as on my own behalf, congratulate Brigadier Dr. Naeem Salik on his appointment as the Executive Director of SPIR. We all are looking forward to working very closely with him. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important and interesting webinar. Let me at the outset say a few words about the main topic of this webinar, that is Indian strategic behavior and stability in South Asia. Pakistan has to constantly keep an eye on India's strategic behavior, as it has an impact on strategic stability in South Asia, as well as security implications for Pakistan. Due to Indian behavior, Pakistan often has to raise its guard and take countermeasures to restore strategic stability in South Asia. For instance, in response to India's cold start doctrine, Pakistan acquired full spectrum deterrence capability. Our tactical nukes are meant to prevent Indian aggression against Pakistan. In the past few years, Indian behavior as a nuclear weapon state has been a cause of deep concern to Pakistan as well as international community. The Balakot incident of 26 February 2019, when Indian Air Force bombed Pakistani territory, was the first ever case of military aggression by one nuclear weapon state against another nuclear weapon state. However, the very next day, India had to suffer humiliation when Kiev shot down 2 Indian Air Force aircraft and captured 1 pilot. Pakistan was thus able to demonstrate its ability as well as will to defend its territorial integrity against any aggression. Indian submarines, as you all know, have tried to sneak into Pakistani waters on several occasions in the past few years, but were detected by Pakistan Navy each time. Launching of BrahMos missile on Pakistan in March this year was another irresponsible act on the part of India as a nuclear weapon state. India exploits its territorial disputes with China and Pakistan to extract political and military concessions from the West by projecting a two-front war from Pakistan and China simultaneously. As a result, new platforms introduced by India adversely affect the strategic stability in the region. Now let me come to my subtopic, which is Indian Balancing Act with Russia, USA, and China. In the post-Cold War period, India diversified its foreign policy and nurtured relations with all major powers, including the US, EU, France, the UK, Russia, and China. However, due to current geopolitical realities, India has a daunting task trying to balance its ties with three major powers: the US, Russia, and China. India has strategic relations with both Russia and the US, and siding with one of these countries should, in principle, cost India its relationship with the other. However, that has not been the case so far, despite India's refusal to side with Russia, refusal to side with the West over Ukraine crisis. Russia has been India's most trustworthy partner for more than 5 decades. But in recent years, despite deteriorating relations with the US, Moscow has enhanced its strategic partnership with China, and India has to be mindful of this. As we know, throughout the Ukraine crisis, India has abstained on every United Nations resolution dealing with the matter and refused to join the international community in economic measures against Moscow. New Delhi has called for a cessation of hostilities and resolution of the problem through dialogue. Indian repeated refusal to vote against Russia in the Security Council over Ukraine war has been interpreted by many as a pro-Russian move. This has raised questions about India's ability to balance its historically reliable and strategic partnership with Russia while nurturing its growing relationship with the US. As it stands, India's so-called balancing act is becoming increasingly unbalanced in favor of Russia. Russia and India, as time-tested strategic partners, have been cooperating on political, security, and other strategic matters for a very long time and are continuing to do so. Even though Indo-Russian trade numbers pale in comparison to India-US numbers, India's defense and energy partnership with Russia are of utmost importance. India may have taken a strategic tilt towards the US in the last decade, but according to SPIR, Russia continues to be its biggest supplier of defense equipment, accounting for about 58% of arms imports. However, Indian diplomatic sources claim that while India has increased its defense purchases from the US, Russian equipment makes up about 70% of country's current arsenal, which is indicative of the extent to which India depends on Russia in the field of defense. Notwithstanding the possibility of American sanctions through CISSS, India not only decided to go ahead with the deal for S-400 missile defense system that it signed in 2018, but also finalized a fresh deal worth Indian rupees 5,000 crores for the manufacture of 750,000 AK-2000 Russian assault rifles. India is making Russian MiG fighter planes and Su-30 jets under license in India. The two sides have collaborated to develop and produce supersonic BrahMos missiles. And India has also built a nuclear submarine with Russian assistance. In the decade between 2011 and 2021, the trend indicator value of India's arms imports from Russia was US $22.8 billion. In the same period, India's total import from the United States, the United Kingdom, Israel, and France stood at US $13.5 billion, or 59% of its imports from Russia. This is obviously not good news for the US, which has been encouraging India to move away from Russia, particularly particularly with regard to its defense equipment, and instead increase interoperability with the US and its allies. India and Russia also cooperate in the areas of space, energy, and science and technology. For example, Russia is building 6 nuclear power plants of 1,000 megawatt capacity each in Kudankulam, Tamil Nadu. India and Russia have already reached an agreement to build another 6 nuclear power plants at some other site in India. Ironically, the West sanctions on Russia have given a big stimulus to India-Russia bilateral trade. In 2021-2022, India's exports to Russia stood at 3.25 billion, while imports were at $9.87 billion. India has been buying bulk of its oil and wheat requirements from Russia on discounted prices. During April to June 2022, India's oil imports from Russia rose to 682,000 barrels per day from 22,500 barrels per day in the same period last year. New Delhi has increased its oil imports from Russia by circumventing international sanctions. It has received 34 million barrels of discounted Russian oil since 24 February 2022, when the war in Ukraine started. Russia's crude oil imports are now the second largest source for India after Iraq, when the US and its allies are rallying hard for a united front against Russia. Russia and India have decided to use the rupee-ruble mechanism to trade oil, military hardware, and other commodities. According to Russian Foreign Minister, Russia is willing to supply anything India wants to buy. And during the recently held Brig summit, President Putin said that Russia and India were negotiating establishment of a chain of Indian supermarkets in Russia. However, despite Russia's staunch disapproval, India has continued to pursue Indo-Pacific strategy through regular engagements with the US and other Quad members. India and the US both see China as the biggest threat and are committed towards cooperating in the Indo-Pacific to manage China's rise as two of the important members of the Quad. However, despite being part of the Quad, India has been excluded from AUKUS. The US also assigned the role of net security provider to India in the region. However, neither Pakistan nor China has accepted this. The US has said that there was no red line for New Delhi, but Washington did not want to see a rapid scaling up of Indian purchases from Russia. The US has also not imposed sanctions on India for purchase of S-400 missiles. Instead, it went out of its way to grant a congressional waiver to India. However, despite their strategic convergence in the Asia-Pacific region, New Delhi's stance on the Ukraine crisis is increasingly becoming a cause of particular concern for the US. President Joe Biden has described India as the only country among the Quad members that is somewhat shaky in acting against Russia. To put pressure on India, the US Secretary of State has recently criticized Indian human rights abuses. There have also been write-ups about the possibility of replacing India with South Korea in the Quad. questions have also been raised about India as a reliable Quad partner. I'll take a few more minutes before I conclude. Let me make 2 points. Number one, India needs Russian support to manage its relations with China. And number two, Russia has been using Kashmir issue to put pressure on India. This happened during 2017 and 18, when India appeared to be going too close to the US. Let me explain this. In December 2017, sixth party speakers conference was held in Islamabad. These parties included Pakistan, China, Afghanistan, Iran, and Turkey and Russia. The declaration of that meeting contained an article which said that Kashmir issue should be resolved in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions. Now, this was not the Russian position. Russian position is that it should be resolved bilaterally in accordance with the Simla Agreement and other bilateral understandings. Russians were aware of this, but they went along with this. I was ambassador of Pakistan to Russia at that point of time. We also noticed that the Russian media was, writing a lot on Kashmir issue, and in many articles, Kashmir was described as a disputed territory, and it was said that this resolution should be in accordance with the UN Security Council resolution. Then in May, India felt the pressure, and it was also a bit disappointed with the promises made by the US, which did not come through. And in May 2018, Prime Minister Modi came to meet with President Putin in Sochi. And at that point of time, Indian as well as Russian media said that Modi had basically come to seek a reset with Russia. And after that, we noticed that the mention of Kashmir from the Russian media had vanished. And subsequently, Russia also did not want to refer to that particular paragraph in meetings held in, at other places, particularly in Turkey. So, this is what I want to say. And all is not well in India-US relations, particularly with regard to India's policy concerning Russia over the Ukraine crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Now we will move to our question and answer session. We have a bunch of questions for our speakers. The first question is addressed to Dr. Jaspal. The question is by Dr. Shahid Hamid. He's from Women University, AJK. His question is, Dr. Jaspal referred that China is bigger challenge as compared to Russia, and India is beneficiary of this perception and managed institutionalization of relations with US. What are the US limitations of this strategic buildup? Will this also play any role in future order? Kindly unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for the question. I think that US first limitation is that it is dealing with a strategic partner which is preserving its strategic autonomy, which is ready to play a role in balancing, but not ready to join the bloc. I'm referring to Indian External Affairs ministers, you can say repeated this impression. This is first limitation, that they are unable to deal with a power, or Americans are habitual in our region to have a submissive power like United States. So this is the first point. Second limitation is that within the region, when you go, if you see, the Americans have been searching local Leviathan. And in this context, of course, India is a big power, and how they find it, but there's a limitation. If you see India's military buildup, India's military doctrine or nuclear posture, it is overwhelmingly, nearly 80 to 90%, I think Dr. Salik will be in a better position to further elaborate this point. It is deployed or Pakistan oriented. It is a Indian Western border oriented rather than a Northern border oriented. So this is also a limitation if they look the partner, that how it will be going to assist them or in the future, because they need something. And third is, the American limitation here is India's, you can say, maintaining its cordial relations with the Russia, and the Russians cementing China or convergence between the Chinese and Russian. Then there is another limitation. India is not ready to, you can say, move out or challenge and China outrightly. It is wanted to maintain its membership of SCO as well as BRICS. So these are the limit in the many Americans. And finally, I can again revisit that the Americans on the one side, they're giving it too much, you can say, India importance. But on the other side, India is failing to deliver, to check the Chinese rise, which they think. So these are the limitations which the Americans face while dealing with India. And on the other side, if you see in this Euro-Asia, Russia is not available. It is very closer with the China. China's BRI is moving ahead, and though Chinese do not own string of pearls the way the Americans define, but if we can take it as a strategic part of the Chinese policy, India announced necklace of diamond, which encouraged the Americans to go for Indo-Pacific, strengthening India's Indo-Pacific strategy or coupling it, but that is just a rhetoric. So these are the limitations at the sea as well as at the continental level on the strategic chessboard, as well as on the economic and diplomatic chessboard.
Thank you so much, sir. The second question is from Komal Khan. She's a research officer at SPIR. The question is, the US is constructing network of security alliances and partnership to deploy advanced war-fighting capabilities in strategic theaters in Indo-Pacific, and India is a significant member of that in Indian Ocean. However, the pattern of Indian foreign policy shows that India's reluctance to enter into security framework. Therefore, what are the prospects of India's military involvement in the US-led Indo-Pacific security structures? Anyone among the speakers can answer.
Let me first, I try to answer, and then my other colleagues will add it quickly. It's a wrong perception. In the Indo-Pacific strategic framework, India is very actively participating. The only is that India has its own limitation. How I qualify my point. If you see that India announced Indo-Pacific strategy, India announced that it is a net security provider of the region, which has been in the last 1 decade receiving positive vibes from the United States. India is building Blue Water Navy. And then India is in the security architecture in the Indian Ocean nuclearization. India is contributing a lot. And then India, where I'm saying India is trying to maintain some kind of announce that it is not, or it will not be part of balance by their, what you call it, external affairs minister, but if their external affairs minister fails to realize that India is an active part of Quad. First time when the Quad summit was virtual led by Biden last year, if you read the speech of the Biden and the Prime Minister Modi, they start talking about the security. security of Indian Ocean, Asia Pacific, or whatever you use the new term, according to them, Indo-Pacific. They talked about technology cooperation. They talked about military, you can say economic cooperation and associated military exercises. And it has been increasing. With the Quad, there is no linkages with Israel, UAE, and this part of the world, West Asia also. So by that way, my understanding is India is very much actively participating or very much active in the Indo-Pacific strategic or security architecture.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is from Ms. Rahat Iqbal. She's Associate Director at CISSS. Her question is, what could be the possible options for Pakistan to maintain a strategic equilibrium with regards to Indo-US strategic partnership? Anyone among the speakers can answer.
Would you repeat a question? Shermano, can you repeat the question?
Fine, sir. What could be the possible options for Pakistan to maintain a strategic equilibrium with regard to Indo-US strategic partnership?
I think that we are maintaining, we are doing well. We have a strategic partner, China. With China, we are not budging on anything. Besides it, that we are also strengthening our naval power. But where is the element is missing? The element of missing is that in the Indo-Pacific, we as a literal state has maintained our limited role, but we have to explore, because in the Indo-Pacific, there is another, France is very important country, but we are not looking, though France has no big deals with India. Then there are other kind of a thing. We have to go for, I'm not saying that we start bandwagoning the China or Russia, we start developing our understanding and strengthening with them. I think that whatever the available options are, we are enjoying and we are using them very intelligently. And here I have to submit that when these things happen at the strategic chessboard, Pakistan should not be worried, because these alliances politics or partnership politics has its own, you can say, dynamical force which generates a process which leads building up what we teach the students in the structural rails paradigm. So my understanding is we must be confidently dealing with our existing strategic partner, China, and also maintaining our relations with the other. Of course, when we say block system or geoeconomics will be determinant of our security policy, there we need to revisit. The world is defined with the, what we call it, realist paradigm in the strategic literature, not the, you can say, idealist paradigm.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, we have Lieutenant General Naeem Khalil Lodi on the panel. Sir, if you like to comment, kindly unmute yourself.
जी बहुत शुक्रिया सबको। अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
Yes, sir.
सबसे पहले तो डॉक्टर साहब, डॉक्टर नईम, आपको मुबारक हो। आई एम श्योर दैट SPIR अंडर योर लीडरशिप विल गो फर्दर अहेड और अपने काम काज करेंगी। और तीनों पैनलिस्ट का मैं बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ। बहुत अच्छा लगा मुझे, बड़ा कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव था, बड़ा बैलेंस था। और एक्सीलेंसी काजी साहब ने, डॉक्टर जसपाल साहब ने, डॉक्टर आलिया साहब ने जो बातें की हैं, उसका जो मेरी समझ में आया वो ये है कि ये जो स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप है इंडो-US, इसमें यूँ लगता है हमें कि शायद हिंदुस्तान अमेरिका के सारे अज़ाइम पूरे नहीं करेगा, लेकिन अपने अज़ाइम पूरे कर लेगा, टेक्नोलॉजी हासिल कर लेगा, अपनी इकोनॉमिक स्ट्रेंथ बढ़ा लेगा, और जो उसके इरिटेंट हैं, जिसमें पाकिस्तान सबसे बड़ा इरिटेंट है, उसको किसी तरीके से रिमूव करने की कोशिश करेगा। और शायद अमेरिका भी यही चाहता है कि अगर वो नेट सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइडर हिंदुस्तान को रखना है उसने इस रीजन में, تو یہ جو اریٹنٹس ہیں انڈیا کے ان کو ختم کیا جائے، اور اس میں ایک مین اریٹنٹ پاکستان کا ہے اور کشمیر کا ہے. تو مجھے خدشہ اس بات کا کہ ایسا نہ ہو کہ پاکستان امریکہ کی آربیٹریشن مان کر کشمیر کا مسئلہ حل کرنے کی کوشش کرے ان حالات میں، جبکہ ہندوستان بڑے اسٹرانگ پوزیشن میں ہے اور ہم کافی ویک پوزیشن میں ہیں. جہاں تک تعلقات کی بات ہے، تجارت کی بات ہے، وہ ایک شاید اتنا بڑا مسئلہ نہیں ہے، سوائے اس کے کہ ایک طرف اگر کشمیریوں کے ساتھ ظلم و ستم بھی ہوتا رہے، ریپ بھی ہوتا رہے، اور ہم تجارت بھی کرتے رہے، یہ کس حد تک مناسب ہے یا غیر مناسب ہے اخلاقی طور پہ. لیکن اسٹریٹجک طور پہ اگر ہم اس وقت مسئلہ حل کرنے کی کوشش کریں گے تو وہ میرا خیال ہے کہ کافی پرابلم ہو جائے گا. باقی ڈاکٹر جسپال صاحب کی ایک بات سے میں تھوڑا سا ڈس ایگری کروں گا. وہ یہ کہہ رہے تھے کہ ہم شاید بہت اچھا بیلنس آؤٹ کر رہے ہیں یہ دونوں پاورز کے درمیان. میرا خیال ہے ہم کر رہے تھے، لیکن اب مجھے ایسا محسوس ہوتا ہے کہ امریکہ نے یہ پریشر ڈالا ہے ہمارے اوپر کہ آپ یہ فیصلہ کر لیں کہ آپ نے ابھی کس رخ پر جانا ہے. اور مجھے ایسے لگ رہا ہے کہ ہم نے اپنے آپ کو امریکہ کا جو پیراڈائم ہے اس ریجن میں اس میں فٹ کرنے کی کوشش کی ہے. اور شاید تھوڑا سا چین، مجھے نہیں معلوم ایکسیلنسی اس پہ بہتر ڈال سکیں گے روشنی، کہ چین شاید ناخوش ہو جو کچھ ابھی تک ہو رہا ہے. کیونکہ جو کچھ میں دیکھ رہا ہوں افغانستان میں، افغانستان کے ساتھ ہمارے تعلقات اور افغانستان میں جو ہو رہا ہے، اور جس طریقے سے ہم ہندوستان کے قریب جانے کی کوشش کر رہے ہیں، اور جس طریقے سے اسرائیل کے ماننے کی کوئی بات چیت ہو رہی ہے جس میں کوئی مذائقہ نہیں ہے، میں اس بحث میں نہیں پڑھنا چاہتا. لیکن مجھے نظر یہ آ رہا ہے کہ جو چیزیں جس سمت میں بڑھ رہی ہیں وہ امریکن پریشر کے تحت بڑھ رہی ہیں. اور یہ میں جاننا چاہوں گا ایکسیلنسی قاضی صاحب سے کہ ان حالات میں ہمارے فورن جو پالیسی ہے، آپ کے خیال میں کیا اس کو ریوائز کرنے کی ضرورت ہے؟ یہ جو ہم نے نئی لائن اڈاپٹ کی ہے، یہ ہم نے ٹھیک سمت اختیار کر لی ہے؟ بہت شکریہ.
سر تھینک یو ویری مچ. بہت ویلڈ پوائنٹس آپ نے جو ہے وہ ریز کیے ہیں. اور میرے خیال میں کہ ہماری فارن پالیسی جو ہے وہ بہت مطلب وہ سکسیزفل رہی ہے، اور ہم نے اپنی پرائرٹیز جو ہیں وہ چینج نہیں کی، بلکہ دوسرے ملکوں کی پرائرٹیز جو ہیں وہ چینج ہوتی رہی ہیں. ہم نے ہمیشہ امریکہ سے اچھے تعلقات چاہے، لیکن امریکہ کی پرائرٹیز بدلتی رہیں. اور جہاں تک میری ریڈنگ ہے، پھر ایک دفعہ پھر ہماری امریکہ کے ساتھ جو ہے ریلیشن شپ کچھ بہتر ہو رہی ہے، اور افغانستان ہمیشہ اس میں ایک بہت بڑا فیکٹر رہا ہے. چین کے ساتھ ہمیں مطلب ہم اسٹیٹ فاسٹ رہے ہیں. ہم 9/11 کے بعد بھی امریکہ کے بہت کلوز رہے، اور ہم جب سوویت انٹرونشن ہوئی افغانستان میں اس کے بعد بھی ہم بہت کلوز رہے امریکہ کے ساتھ. لیکن ہم نے کبھی اس کلوز ریلیشن شپ کو اپنی جو چائنا کے ساتھ ریلیشن شپ ہے اس پہ اثر انداز نہیں ہونے دیا. میں یہ کہنے کی اجازت چاہوں گا کہ جب ہم نے اس وقت اپنی ریلیشن شپ کو چائنا کے ساتھ تعلقات کے ساتھ اثر انداز ہونے نہیں دیا، تو اب میرا نہیں خیال کہ کوئی جسٹیفیکیشن ہے اس کی. اس لیے میرا خیال ہے کہ ہم صحیح ٹریک پہ جا رہے ہیں چائنا کے ساتھ، اور ہمیں فردر اس کو اسٹرینتھن کرنا چاہیے، اور سی پیک کو پوری طریقے سے امپلیمنٹ کرنا چاہیے. رشیا کے ساتھ میرا خیال ہے کہ پاسبلٹیز ہیں، اور جس طرح انڈیا ایک انڈیپینڈنٹ اپروچ کے ساتھ ریلیشن شپ کو بڑھا رہا ہے. ظاہر ہے کہ ہماری وہ ریلیشن شپ نہیں ہے رشیا کے ساتھ جو انڈیا کی ہے. اگر کمپیئر کریں گے تو ہم رشیا انڈیا کی ریلیشن شپ کو پاکستان چائنا ریلیشن شپ سے ہم کمپیئر کر سکتے ہیں کہ ایک کمپریہنسو اسٹریٹجک پارٹنرشپ ہے پاکستان اور چائنا کی. اسی طرح ایک کمپریہنسو اسٹریٹجک پارٹنرشپ ہے رشیا اور انڈیا کی. لیکن اسپیس اویلیبل ہے، خاص کر کے انرجی کی فیلڈ میں. ہمارے پاس LNG کی شارٹیجز ہیں، اور جن کمپنیز کے ساتھ ہم نے کانٹریکٹ سائن کیے تھے، ایک سنگاپورین اور ایک اٹالین، انہوں نے ریپیٹڈلی ہمیں جو ہے ڈس اپوائنٹ کیا ہے. تو سعودی عربیہ بھی آئل امپورٹ کر رہا ہے रशिया से इंडिया भी कर रहा है, चाइना भी कर रहा है, तो हम भी इस तरफ जो है सोच सकते हैं। डेफिनेटली प्रेशर्स आएंगे, लेकिन हमें जो है अपने ऑप्शंस को एक्सप्लोर करके उनको परस्यू करना पड़ेगा। सिर्फ ये वन साइडेड रिलेशनशिप नहीं है। अगर हमारे अमेरिका के साथ इंटरेस्ट हैं तो उनके भी हमारे साथ इंटरेस्ट हैं। वो इंडिया पे बहुत ज़्यादा काउंट कर रहे थे, लेकिन इस क्राइसिस में इंडिया ने ये प्रूव कर दिया कि वो अमेरिका की कम सुन रहा है और अपने मफादात को ज़्यादा अहमियत दे रहा है। रशिया से ऑयल भी इंपोर्ट कर रहा है। जैसे मैंने अभी थोड़ी देर पहले कहा था अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में कि प्रेसिडेंट पुतिन ने कहा है कि इंडिया जो है अपने जो सुपरमार्केट्स हैं उनकी चेन इस्टेब्लिश करना चाहता है। तो इंडिया डिसाइसिवली इस वक्त जो है अपने रशिया की तरफ चल रहा है। तो हमें भी कुछ सोचना चाहिए इस बारे में। और बाकी दो जो बिग पावर्स हैं उनके साथ भी हमारे ताल्लुकात अच्छे हैं, लेकिन वो इस वक्त जो जियोपॉलिटिक्स हैं उसमें इतना ज़्यादा मैटर नहीं करते। Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is also addressed to Ambassador Qazi Khalil. The question is by Haris Bilal Malik. He's a researcher at Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. His question is, as you have discussed, given India's increasing regional and international role, which is specifically based on its balanced strategic ties with both US and Russia, while having increasing convergence with China, this would likely disturb the stability of South Asia even further, and the ultimate sufferer would be Pakistan. Based on these developments, what does Pakistan needs to do in its both strategic and as well as its diplomatic domains?
First of all, we need to be confident of ourselves, because we are a nuclear weapon state, and we are a very strong state from this perspective. And we need to, we need to have high estimation of ourselves. All big powers are interested in having relations with Pakistan. I need not say anything about China. Russia has been interested in oil and gas projects. They are still there on the table. If we make a move, Russia would be forthcoming. So we need to decide what would be the right time for us to make a move in that direction. Hopefully, the Iranian nuclear deal would be finalized in the near future. And that should give us an opportunity to, complete Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline. Now, with that, we can explore options with the Russian gas in via Turkmenistan and Iranian pipelines and out in Pakistan. This option can also be there. There are other proposals for undersea pipelines from Iran to this region. So we have many options but for certain reasons, for the time being, we are not discussing those. As I pointed out in my presentation, we have the ability and the will to protect ourselves, so we should not worry on that score. We have strategic partnership with China. We are a member of SCO. Afghanistan under Taliban gives us an opportunity to move quickly. We have plans for transit trade and making roads and railway lines. We need to implement those plans. I think this is unique opportunity. India is not in a position to benefit from this because it does not share border with Afghanistan. We need an aggressive strategy to make roads and railway line through Afghanistan. We have a very good forum which was established by our side, which involves all the neighboring countries of Afghanistan, that was established last year. We should have frequent meetings of that, and with the involvement and assistance of all neighboring countries of Afghanistan, I think we should move quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is addressed to Dr. Atia Ali Qazi. The question is by Mohammad Usman. He's a research assistant at CISSS Karachi. As the global geopolitical and geostrategic rivalries continue to exist between big global powers, even along with complex economic interdependence, how can improvement of relations between Pakistan, India, and China, which you referred to, become possible?
Thank you, Swan. We know that we exist in the age of globalization, where there is competition, there are conflicts, there are wars, and there's cooperation at the same time. So all these great and major powers, which we are referring to as regards their rivalries and conflicts and disputes, they are at least maintaining that fine balance in their foreign policies and in their relations with not only their friends, but also with the, even with the aggressors, I would say, with frenemies. And there are different kinds of relations once we go in details of this topic. But I'll just, answer your question, try to answer your question. And we know that even a small state is of value for the international system and for international politics. And in our case, the only problem is Indian stubbornness, I would say. Well, we can easily imitate the geopolitics of another region. If you've studied ASEAN, let's say, Southeast Asian countries, the way they have managed with their conflicts and disputes, and the way they are walking a very, thin rope while taking care of the balance of power in the region, while taking care of their relations with China and the United States at the same time. So that's possible in this region as well, but it's not happening at all. Only and only due to the stubbornness of one state that has expansionist and revisionist agenda at the table. So India needs to learn that it has to coexist in South Asia. If it's ready to include China by calling, different names to the region, calling it Southern Asia, and, referring to trilemmas and different things of that kind. So why isn't it ready to work on this region, on South Asia, and work with Pakistan? Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The next question is from Ms. Amber Afreen. She's a research officer at SPIR. I think Dr. Jaspal would be the better speaker to answer the question. Pakistan has rejected India's purported closure of highly irresponsible BrahMos misfire incident. If India continues to brush such potentially catastrophic mishaps under the carpet, what could be the consequences on the future of South Asian strategic stability?
My understanding is that misfire happened, missile misfire, and it was not professionally this accident was addressed. If we see in the post-misfired missile or accident, the developments, first of all, Indians took 2 to 3 days to admit that there was an accident. Then the report took place many months. Despite Pakistan's offer that we work together because we both are vulnerable, being an adjacent border, and the probability of flash up of the, or you can say, escalation of the crisis, but the Indian response was not adequate. Besides that, the most important thing is that the international community also mummed over this issue. We did not find much, you can say, in the literature by the international community's response, particularly with reference to this kind of accident. And in the follow-up, India seems still not prepared to work with Pakistan how these kind of the accidents will be avoided in the future, or what will be the mechanism if this kind of a mishap took place. So this is, and neither we are finding the Americans or the other powers which have a, you can say, influence over India to convince the Indian strategic community as well as the ruling elite that developing some kind of a mechanism with Pakistan to avoid or to respond these kind of accidents, that is not only in the interest of the India, but also the entire region, they are failing. But here comes most important thing is that neither India is working, nor the international community is working, and we remain vulnerable to these kind of things. Finally, India's this missile misfired also underscore a very important point that India has been working on the indigenous missiles build-up programs since 1983 with the foreign assistance, like in the BrahMos case or in this missile, supersonic missile case, the Russians were assisting India, but India has failed to produce reliable, you can say, missiles. And in such a situation, this is a very dangerous, especially when there is a tension or there is a deadlock between the two nuclear armed rivals.
If I am allowed to just add a sentence.
Sure, sir.
In my opinion, in my assessment, and I do not insist on that, I can be wrong. I will just say it was not an accident. And number two, our response was not adequate. We cannot discuss it beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now
Can
we
I
move
please
to
make a comment?
last question of the session. Yes, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
And my comment will be relevant to something what Rahat also said about the strategic equilibrium, that right now we need to, establish, create, develop, and disseminate a very, useful narrative on these issues. And with respect to policy and the advocacy and outreach, अभी इस मामले में हम लोग काफी हमें मेहनत करने की जरूरत है, बिकॉज जब ये सवाल होता है कि हमें करना क्या है, तो उसमें हमने ये करना है एज टीचर्स, एज प्रोफेशनल्स, एज स्टूडेंट्स एज वेल, कि नेशनल इंटरेस्ट की बेस पे हमारा नैरेटिव बिल्ड हो और उसको फिर हम प्रोपेगेट भी करें, उसको शेयर भी करें और सबको बताएं कि पाकिस्तान इस कंडीशन में, इस सिचुएशन में किस तरह मैनेज कर रहा है इंडिया के साथ नेबरहुड, और कन्विंस करें दुनिया को भी और सबसे पहले तो अपने लोगों को. So that consensus and that unity is required as a first step. और जो नेशनल नैरेटिव है, जो हमारी पॉलिसीज हैं, उस पे आई थिंक हम सबको मुत्तहिद भी होना है और उस लिहाज से ही उस बात को आगे लेकर चलना है. लेट्स से ऑन टीवी शोज इवन, जब अभी जैसे सर जसपाल ने भी जो आंसर दिया है उस पे 10 लोग बोलेंगे और 10 डिफरेंट बातें करेंगे, तो आई थिंक ये एक ऐसा सिग्नल है जो जिसको भी जाएगा, द पर्सन वुड अंडरस्टैंड कि हमारी डोमेस्टिक इश्यूज क्या है. तो इनको हमें एड्रेस करने की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है. थैंक यू.
Thank you so much, ma'am. With that, we'll move to our last question. The time is also almost up. The last question is from Jawad Ali Shah. He's a research assistant at CISSS Karachi. His question is, in view of India's membership to anti-China groups and simultaneous recognition to Beijing's One China principle, would India be able to maintain its neutral position over Taiwan as it has done so over Ukraine? Anyone among the panelists can answer the question.
Okay, let me make it one thing. India does not support one China policy. Sometimes they talk, but they do not. We have seen recently, there was a statement by the Indian Foreign Minister and other leaders as well. They said that if China does not support India's position on Kashmir, India is not prepared to support China's one state policy, one China policy. So in that context, second, on the Taiwan, India is very much taking the line what the Americans have did. So this is alarming, which I deliberately avoided in my presentation to draw the attention towards this, that India on the one side, rhetorically, it is very active, but practically it knows its limitation. That's why when we focus on India on this issue, it is not supportive, but at the same time, very careful. We have to keep in mind that if there's a fire of the cannons, or we heard the voice of the cannons in the Taiwan Strait, it will be having impact in our region. Why? Because India is a member of the Quad. Quad is there to protect. You have to keep in mind 2 Quad members very energetically supporting the Taiwan, that is Japan and United States. And the Chinese are very much determined to assert their position there. And this year is also in China, a decisive year about the shippings. The future in November. And this year is very important for the Americans because there is a midterm election in November, 435 House of Representatives seat selection, and 36 or 35 House of Senate selection. So these 3 months, next 3 months will be very critical, and we have to wait and see how India will further move on the Taiwan.
Thank you so much, sir. With that, we'll end our today's session. I would like to thank all the speakers and panelists for their invaluable contribution and making this session a great learning experience for all of us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.